Oh, okay, no, alright, that's fine. Hey guys, it's Alexis, aka The Sloth Reader, and I'm here today to do my November wrap-up. Sorry this is going up super late on Friday. I basically just got off of work, and I'm sitting down to do this because I didn't do it earlier like I should have. The other thing I'm going to mention is I am actually not going to be doing a book haul video, because I kind of already have this month all planned out, and I kind of didn't have a way to fit it into like my video schedule, but I will link below the picture that I'm going to take for my Instagram to post on there, and that way if you guys want to know all the books I bought in November, you can just go there and get our. I completed 8 books in the month of November. 3 of which I finished in the last 2 days of November. It kind of looked like I wasn't going to have a very impressive reading month, but I buckled down and finished it, and so I'll just go ahead and tell you guys the 8 books I read this month. The first book I completed in the month of November was actually an audiobook that I listened to, and that was Breakfast at Tiffanys by Truman Capote. I have seen the movie Breakfast at Tiffanys, obviously, but I actually didn't even know it was a book. Especially it's very interesting to know that it's written by the same guy who wrote In Cold Blood, because they're very, very different books. But yeah, I listened to this one on the audiobook, and to be honest, I don't think I would have enjoyed it nearly as much if I hadn't listened to it on audiobook, because the audiobook that I listened to was read by Michael C. Hall, who is the guy that plays Dexter on Dexter, and he really did a phenomenal job with the audiobook. He kind of did voices for all the characters, and he really kind of brought some of the satire and the humor to life, and so I definitely really, really enjoyed that, and I give Michael C. Hall's narration like a stellar 5 out of 5. Overall, though, I gave the book a 3 out of 5, just because I was kind of meh about it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. I'm fond of stories that are about a bunch of unlikable people in situations that they get into because they're kind of terrible people. And that's definitely the kind of book that this is. It follows a man, an unnamed narrator, who lives in this apartment building, and he comes across a woman who lives in his apartment building called Holly Golightly. And Holly Golightly is kind of this mysterious character in that she's seen all the time, but nobody really knows who she is, where she's from, and she kind of just spends time with these rich men in order to gain their favor and for them to spend money on her. I don't know if you would technically call that an escort, but that's basically what she is. And it's just about the narrator coming to get to know her and, falling in love with her in a sense. And I mean, in that it was funny because a lot of the scenes, the stuff that came out of her mouth was so crazy. I mean, you're sitting there like, did she really just say that thing? That's so offensive. But it's also kind of awkward funny, because you're like, I shouldn't laugh, but it's like, I'm kind of uncomfortable hearing that, so I'm gonna laugh anyway. And like I said, Michael C. Hall just did a really good job bringing the story to life, and so I definitely commend him for that, and I definitely would be interested in reading anything he narrates in the future. The next book I finished in the month of November was one of my most anticipated releases for the year, and I am pleased to say that in my opinion it did not disappoint, and that is The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. I haven't even written my Goodreads review at this one yet because I haven't really been able to articulate my feelings about this book, but I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, just like I did with Everything, and Nicola Yoon just has such a unique writing style because she writes about just more than the main characters, and that's especially true for this one because written throughout the story are these little chapters that are either from side characters' points of views, or there's even small chapters that are about history and about chemistry and physics and stuff like that. And so I loved that writing style. I loved that every couple of chapters we'd get this break, and it would be this chapter explaining something in the story that wasn't necessarily major, but gave a lot more insight into the characters and, America in general, especially as it relates to being an immigrant, because of course this is about Natasha, who is who is from a Jamaican family who has been living illegally in the United States. And then it's from Daniel's perspective as well, and his family, his parents immigrated from South Korea to New York City to basically get a better life, and they've been raising their kids with and both of these children, or both of these teens, suffer from their parents wanting this mix of their home cultures while also wanting them to embrace the culture of America. And that's just one of the very profound things that are talked about in this book. Overall, this book has a lot to talk about in terms of fate, and about how the actions you make, while they may be small, they might have, terribly severe consequences, both good and bad, on other people's lives. And I loved everything this book had to say. I mean, I wasn't necessarily blown away by either Natasha or Daniel or their romance, but just the way that Nicola Yoon uses these characters and their romance to tell such a much bigger story just absolutely struck me, and I loved it, and I can't even articulate the way I feel about this book because I loved it so much. The next book I finished in the month of November was a big old beast of a book, and that was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I've been trying to read the Harry Potter series this year, as it is December, and I'm only on Order of Phoenix. I'm sure you guys know that I'm not going to be finishing that challenge. But overall, I will still say I have immensely enjoyed reading the Harry Potter books, and I'm excited that I still get to read them in the first part of 2017 and finishing them. Overall, I enjoyed Goblet of Fire, but it wasn't my favorite, which is interesting because Goblet of Fire is actually my favorite movie in the franchise. And so if you're triggered about Harry Potter opinions, maybe you should just skip ahead and not hear what I have to say. Seriously, because I don't want to get into an argument with anybody about this, but I have to admit that I actually like the Goblet of Fire movie better than the book. And the reason is for two reasons, is because this book in a lot of ways felt very convoluted. I felt like there was so much stuff going on that I didn't care about. So many people in the fandom are going to be so pissed off, but like the SVEUW stuff, I didn't care. I was like, great, but that really I didn't feel like it added anything to Hermione's character, in my opinion. I kind of was just like, yeah, okay, that's something Hermione would do, but every chapter that was about it and every time it kept getting brought up, I just didn't care. So I like that the movie cut all of that out because I don't really feel like it was necessary. I mean, I get that it was like kind of cute for her character, I guess, but I just didn't care. And I also I felt like this book lacked such an actual danger feel, because at the end of every trial, it was just like, oh, well, Dumbledore wouldn't have let anybody get hurt anyway. And I was just like, it didn't feel dangerous to me, and that's one of the things I really liked about that movie, is that the visuals, first of all, in that movie are so good. Like, I love the visuals in that movie. Not Ron's hair, that's a terrible visual, but I love just, like, the scene with the dragon and the mermaids and just how they did the CGI for all of those scenes. I absolutely love. And so I just found myself very underwhelmed with a lot of the Triwizard Tournament scenes in this book. And just, yeah, for those reasons, I did still give this probably more accurately, a 4 out of 5 stars. 4.5, 5 out of stars. That was a big mess of words, but yeah, overall it just wasn't my favorite in the series, but I still really enjoyed it all the same. Next book I completed in the month of November was one that wasn't necessarily on my radar at first, but once I found out about it, I just wanted to read it so bad, and so I only got this book last month, and I was like, I don't care, I'm reading it, I want to read it, I'm in the mood for historical fiction anyway, so I went ahead and picked it up, and that is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, and I have to say that I did not feel like this book disappointed at all. I really, really loved it, and typically, I don't enjoy short stories, and the reason that that's important when looking at this is because this follows two half-sisters and their families through about, 300 years of time, and so it's a lot of, like 250 years, so it's a lot about their families, and you can directly, link characters back to characters before them, and it's interesting how one generation of this family interacts with the next generation of this family, but ultimately, each character only gets about 20 to 30 pages. And the reason that that's shocking that I enjoyed that so much is because I don't usually enjoy stories that are only that long, because I don't feel like I get attached to them, but because it was so interesting to see how, so-and-so's, like how James's story connected with that of his father, Quay's story, it was really interesting, and I kept reading because I wanted to know. I was like, where is this ultimately going to end up? And that being said, this book would have been a 5-star read for me, but I didn't love the ending. I liked the message of the ending and how it relates to the title, Homegoing, but there's something about the way it ended, it just didn't sit right with me. I didn't like it. I found myself, I was just like, oh, but I wish it would have ended this way and blah, blah, blah. And, I mean, that's more of a personal thing rather than the talking for the book itself, but I just didn't love the ending. And I didn't like that it took you a couple of pages per character to really kind of get going. And so for that reason, I did give it a 4 out of 5 stars, but I still absolutely think it's an amazing book, and it's very eye-opening about a lot of the experiences of people in Ghana as they were being introduced to the British, and as well for, people of color in the United States from 1700s all the way to present time. And so, yeah, I definitely think it was a very insightful read, and I highly, highly recommend it. The next book I completed in the month of November was Six Gun Snow White by Catherine M. Valente. It was a novella. It was only about 150 pages, so I went ahead and just picked this up. In case you guys don't know, I basically fell in love with the Western genre this year. When I read Vengeance Road by Aaron Bowman, I was like, wow, I really love Westerns, and I'm on the hunt to basically read so many Western things, it's not even funny, and I picked this up on Book Outlet for like $2, and it was a Snow White retelling, that is set in an almost mystical Wild West, and that aspect of it was very cool. I really liked how Catherine M. Valente adapted the Snow White fairy tale for the Western world. Like, I loved picking out the little parts of it that made sense and being like, that was so cool. Like, I really like how that was adapted. I love the representation of these 7 dwarfs in the story. It's basically just 7 badass women, and I loved that. Like, that was so cool to me. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. One of the stars that I took away was just for the length. Like I said, I'm not big into short stories and novellas. And I just felt like this would have been so much better as like a 300-page novel where there could have been so much more, explanation about, the 7 dwarfs. Like, they get 2 pages to describe all 7 of their backstories, and like I could have read 7 individual chapters about each of their backstories. So that was a little disappointing. I think this had enough that it could have been a full-length book with so much more talked about and given more explanation into the evil queen and her character. And ultimately, I was very disappointed in the ending. I closed it, and I was like, that's how that ended, and I was like, oh, I really don't like that. I don't like that at all. The ending felt like it was trying to be profound, but it really felt like a cop-out to me, and I didn't like it. But but overall, I still enjoyed it for probably the first 120 pages, and what's really cool about this is that there are these couple of illustrations throughout that are really beautiful. And I loved seeing those and seeing the scenes that they represented, so those definitely get a star all on their own. Also, Red Deer gets a star because he's a cutie and I liked him, and I could have read a whole book about him, so he gets a star all on its own. The next book I finished in the month of November was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I know I had talked about it way back when that I was a little apprehensive about this one because I had previously read The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, and I did not enjoy it at all. And so I was kind of hesitant about how I would feel about The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's very short, obviously, and I'm still trying to figure out whether or not I really liked it or whether or not I really hated it. Right now, I'm kind of at that meh kind of feeling about it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. There were some parts I really, really liked. I actually really enjoyed the beginning, and I enjoyed watching Dorian undergo this corruption and how it had to do with the teachings he learned from Lord Henry, but also with the painting that was given to him by Basil Hallward. But I also just found so many of the parts just utterly boring and cumbersome, and the fact that the first 3 pages are just Oscar Wilde describing what the flowers look like, and chapter 11 in and of its entirety, I could have stopped reading right then because it just talks about Dorian's hobbies, and it was so boring, and I hated that. And also, Lord Henry just went on so much about these things, and it was just him being such a pretentious white dude, and that was just put a bad taste in my mouth, because I was like, I don't care, and then it picked up a little bit towards the end when Dorian does something, and I was like, oh, cool, I'm really interested to see how this all works out, and then it was worked out a chapter later, and then it was just 3 chapters of nothing, And so I really loved some of the parts, but then I really hated some of the other parts. And so I ultimately think that just giving it 3 stars is a pretty accurate measure. But yeah, I'm never going to be able to forgive Oscar Wilde for how painful reading chapter 11 was. So that's something to be said. The next book I finished is a book that took me utterly by surprise. I was not expecting to love it nearly as much as I did. And that was Every Last Word by Tamara Ireland Stone. When I tell you guys that I really had no urgency to pick this book up until Emma at Emma Books did her Mental Health Awareness Week. She talked about this book quite a bit, and it made me a little interested to pick it up. So I went ahead and did, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I can understand where other people might not have loved it, but I just intensely and so quickly felt such an emotional attachment to this book. I loved Sam, the main character. I related to her so much, with just struggling with mental health. And of course I don't have OCD, which it is about Sam and her OCD and how she discovers a poetry corner, basically, where she starts to feel safe and she starts to feel understood, and it gives her like an outlet for her obsessive compulsive disorder. So I loved Sam. I could relate to her so much, dealing with the obsessive thoughts and just dealing with feeling sick and unhealthy all the time. And it's such small things, like she was a swimmer and I used to swim competitively, and so hearing her talk about that weightlessness and the freedom of being in the water was something I absolutely could relate to. And her talking about having a group of shitty friends, I can relate to that too, because I've had many shitty friends throughout my life, and every time something would happen, I totally understood where she was coming from. And I'm not a big poetry person, but I really liked the poetry aspects of this book. I liked how they really helped to represent each of the characters, and I liked that none of these characters felt very stereotypical. They all felt like real people, and I really, really loved that. And there's something to be said about when I don't see a plot twist coming. I'm usually pretty good at predicting them, but I did not see the plot twist in this book coming, and being taken so surprised, I mean, I had to put my book down. I couldn't read because I was like, what? I was like, I have what? Like, I had to like turn on TV and watch TV for a couple of minutes because I couldn't focus on reading because I was so shaken by this plot twist. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend it. For people who just kind of want to know a little bit more about OCD, Tamara Ireland Stone did a lot of research on OCD, and, she talks about that in her author's note about the inspiration for her book and the multiple people she talked to about OCD and the research she did. And so if you want to learn more about OCD, I think this is a nice fiction book to start at, or if you just want to read a book about mental health in general, yes, just read it. The final book I read in the month of November, and that was The Daemoniac by Kat Ross. This is a book that takes place in the 1880s, and it is about a very Sherlock-esque character named Harry, who is the sister of a very, very famous female detective named Myrtle. And it's basically about her impersonating Myrtle when a client comes knocking on the door and says that a friend of theirs has gone missing and they need help finding them. And so she pretends to be Myrtle and goes out to solve this case. And it kind of starts to overwhelm her and turns out to be a lot more than she was initially expecting. Ultimately, I did give this one 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. Penny Dreadful is one of my favorite TV shows, and I liked that this had a very Penny Dreadful-esque premise. I would not say it's nearly as dark as Penny Dreadful is, but it does still have that dark element to it because there is multiple murders throughout the book, and as Harriet tries to solve the case. But I really liked Harry and her John Watson, whose name is actually John Weston. They very much were a John and Sherlock, which I really liked. I kind of like that socially inept character who kind of is just focused on solving crimes and stuff. And Harry was like that, but she wasn't. She still felt very much like her own character. She was not nearly as emotionally removed as her sister Myrtle was. So she still kind of had these emotional moments, and she still cared about people, and I loved it. And I loved that John didn't feel like Watson. He felt very much like his own character as well. He just kind of filled this role of Watson. And I really liked it. So I really liked the characters. Another thing I really liked about this book is that there is no romance in it. There definitely feels like there's a setup for romance in later books because it's very obvious that one of the characters has feelings for the other, but in this book, exactly, there is no romance. It's just about Harry trying to solve this murder, and there really weren't any subplots beyond that. That is the entirety of the book, and I really liked that. I liked that I didn't have to be removed from this, you know, murder investigation. I really liked that. So that was one of the things I really liked about it. I also will say that I liked that this book is supernatural, but it isn't, which is funny because it's also half a star I took off. I liked that the supernatural elements weren't overly in your face. I mean, really, they could have easily been tweaked and not been there at all. That being said, I don't like it being pitched as a supernatural story and then falling, you know, kind of behind on that one, but the next one feels like it's going to be very, very heavily supernatural, which is kind of where my issue with that takes place. But if you're kind of looking for something that's paranormal but isn't overly in your face paranormal, I definitely do think that this is a great read for that reason. Alright guys, so this was a long video because I read a lot of pretty good books this month and I rambled on about them, but I will see you guys soon with another video, but you guys should let me know down below what your favorite read of November was, or if you read any of these books and you want to talk about it, or if you want to discuss with me, with the exception of any of the things I said in my Harry Potter section, because I don't want to get yelled at, so be nice, internet, thanks. And I will see you guys soon with another video.